Ground effect is a car principle for use to produce downforce. But how does it work and how do you set it up? Well, I'm here for you today to explain how all of that works. Just a little disclaimer first. I am not an expert at vehicle dynamics or how car pressure works or this type, but I know the basics and I'm confident enough that I can say that I can explain it so you can also understand. So let's get into a picture which I think explains it a lot. Okay, so here we see a very good picture of how ground effect works in a car, a general car. So we see a Formula 1 car. So you can see here the normal air which goes outside, which you can't see, well, going on top of the, wait. Okay, so this picture I think explains it very well. So you can see that this is an F1 car. You can see here the air which comes from here goes up over here, over the car and on the wings. So this front wing and the rear wing produces downforce. But they obviously, or not obviously, but they produce quite a lot of drag, which is the force pushing you backwards, so you go slower. So what they like to do is to have the air go underneath the car, and using something, I believe it is the Bernoulli principle, it makes it so the air which comes in here is the same amount which goes out. So what they do is they have this huge bunch of air which then goes in here, then it gets smaller and smaller until it reaches a point where it gets very small, the suction, and then it opens back up again, which you can clearly see on F1 cars. Some are a bit bigger, some are a bit smaller. There are, I think, formulas for it, which I don't fully know, but it creates basically a suction point underneath the car because it lowers, because the air gets quicker, which decreases air pressure, and the lower air pressure causes suction, which is in like a vacuum cleaner. And then it gets out of here, and then it speeds up, slows down again. But that's the main principle of it. So you get, so it goes slow, so it goes quicker, and then slower again. And here is where the downforce is produced with suction. But I think to show it a bit better, I'm going to go into Automobilista 2 and show you some different cars and how they use ground effect, or how they try and produce it. You can clearly see here in this Lotus that here you can see that the air is designed to come in here underneath and then go in here and then out. But why they have these skirts is to seal the air from the outside, because they don't want the air underneath to seep out, because that means that the air goes out, or it doesn't produce downforce as such. So you can see here it does, but here there's normally a diffuser, which you will see in the more modern cars. But it's interesting that in this, that this was just the start of ground effect. Then you can see here is when they started, the FIA started to look into ground effect and start banning it. So they had skirts, which you saw in the previous car, but what the problem was that if the skirts had a leak or something broke, then the car could become uncontrollable because the downforce magically just disappears. So here they started limiting it, so you have this nice surface, and here you can see is the start of a diffuser. So basically, in the basic terms, the ground effect is just a big wing of a plane just placed downwards, or I should say upside down. But how did it look in other cars, which aren't Formula 1 cars? Here in the Group C car, you can clearly see, or maybe not very clearly, but they had a minor skirt here. And also you can see from here, this angle, that the front, there was not a lot of ground clearance. So the air really got quite high and then quite quick. And then you can see here, the diffusers, you can see it had a big pressure point right here, and then it opens up. So and I think maybe that with that small pressure point, it gets, that's where the most of the downforce is produced. So it looks like it's a bit in the middle, but then this is just wide open. So there's some cars with these huge diffusers. I know the Aston Martin Valkyrie, and I think the Gordon Murray T50 also has that. But how does a more modern, a 2022 F1 car, how does its floor look like? So you can clearly see here that this, on an modern F1 car, the floor isn't allowed to be covered here. So what they do nowadays is use air to cover it. And then if we go to the diffuser, you can clearly see that it's quite big here, and it's more smooth and not as abrupt as in the Group C car, which is interesting. But that comes with the more simulations you do, the more computers you have, better computers you have, the more simulations, the better simulations you can have, so better better solutions. But what's a solution which can happen with this ground effect, but without having to make a complex floor? Well, the answer to that is this: the Brabham BT46B, also known as the fan car, which you will be seeing soon. Why? So you can see here, it has a very low ground clearance to maximize the seal here. But another solution, which it was actually completely unique with in Formula 1, was, if we just can get this camera angle good, is this. The fan. So you can see here, it seems like they had the fully sealed rear. So, well, minorly there. So no air would sort of get out. So what the thing was, that this fan would be controlled by the engine. So this would spin very quickly, so multiple thousand RPMs, which would create suction. So all the air goes in underneath the car and then up and then there. And this creates a bigger vacuum. So not the Bernoulli principle where it gets low air closer to the ground, higher speed, lower pressure. This helps that, I should say, by producing a more speed, so the air goes quicker, which creates a lower pressure. So this one was very good. It raced only at the 90, I believe it was the 78 Swedish Grand Prix, and it won, I think, very quickly, very well. It dominated, I should say, the whole weekend. And I think they qualified with a full tank, and Niki Lauda qualified like a second or two in front of everyone else. So that's what happens. But when setting up for ground effect, you want to think about the front and rear ride heights. So let me just bring up a good graph, which I think explains what you have to think about quite clearly. Okay, so this is two graphs from Mr. Brake F1's video, Formula 1 Anti-Dive Suspension Explained. Link is down below. But this explains a lot about the correlation between ride height and downforce. So what you want to do when thinking about downforce, and I believe this was about the floor too, is that you can see here the downforce, so lift coefficient, basically you want that to be higher, as high as possible to produce downforce. So you can see here at the high rear ride height in the front, it's very low, but then it gradually grows by more the closer you are to the ground. So at the front, you want it to be as close to the ground as possible without bottoming out. And in the rear, it's a bit more tricky. So it has this sweet spot here of roughly how much at the peak of downforce. So you want to think about that too. But when thinking about the rear, you also want to tune this. You want to tune the rake. So the rake is how high the rear is compared to the front. So a lower rake rake car, which was the Mercedes pre-ground effect, was that it had the rear was quite even with the front in terms of ride height, which made the pressure point of this floor quite further to the rear, which meant that the rear had more downforce and the front that you would get more understeer. And a high rake system would put this pressure point further towards the front and you would get more oversteer. And that's what Red Bull had during the pre-ground effect era, because Verstappen really liked that. But it's not just to do with ground effect, because that's more higher speed. So you want to think about that at the higher speed. But I would say at the higher speed, maybe tune the rear wings and front wings maybe a bit easier. But you can also use the floor. So follow the principles I said. But to do with the weight transfer and everything at slower speed is that if you have a higher rake system, more weight goes into the front, which means that you will get a pointier car, still oversteer. So a higher rake means that you have more oversteer when turning in and obviously when exiting, but also a lower rake system will have understeer. So you have to think about that. But when tuning this, you will run into issues such as bottoming out, which is a very common issue when trying to minimize the ground clearance, which is what Hamilton and Leclerc got into for a bit issues at the US Grand Prix. I'm definitely not sad. But what you want to do is, if you hear the car is bottoming out, and obviously in F1 you also have porpoising, so what you want to do is either make the front higher if it's bottoming out basically everywhere, or if it's only at higher speeds, you can try and fine-tune the suspension stiffness, which the more stiff it is, the more downforce is needed to push it out. But that will obviously induce more oversteer in the lower speed, so it's a fine-tuning there. You could also use the heave spring or third spring, which is it's called, and that helps you at higher speeds to lower the front or the rear depending on what you desire. And also what you want to think about with this rake is at higher speeds you want it to be as flat as possible, because that it gives you a higher top speed. So that's what I say are quite short, 15 minutes or less than that, crash course into ground effect, what it is in basic terms, and how you can tune it, how you can optimize your car for it, even if it doesn't have a flat floor or if it is a fan car. But what do you think? Comment down below. Obviously more experts who are still watching will obviously have more to say, so comment down below for everyone to know. I might add some stuff to the wiki, which is also linked down below. But my next video will hopefully, well, if we think about it, yeah, my next video should hopefully be on the next AMS2 update, because the next beta update is not for media, which I can't tell you why. Well, it is obviously new content, which I can't talk about. But my next video, if it is on that, I hope it is. Otherwise, we'll do another maybe crash course or something. But otherwise, it will probably be something like this, and then the week afterwards, it will be my review or my first thoughts on the new WRC game, which I've bought. So that will be fun. And then after that, we'll see what happens. But until then, I've been Racy Legend. You've been my amazing viewers. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.